Welcome everybody. Welcome to Food Track Austin Startup Week. Thank you for being here. I'm giving, some of you might have heard this already, my super quick spiel. I'm Jen Heiler, I'm with Food and City. We are a local nonprofit that focuses on the food supply chain. There's some flyers outside for our Food and City Challenge Prize. We're in our final stage of our call for submissions. We're looking for startups that are innovating within the food supply chain. We're looking at packaging and trucking and sensors and blockchain and distribution, last food mile, anything in that space. If you know anybody in that space that has an idea, a prototype, send them our way. October 15th is our deadline. And then come November 1st, we announce finalists. We pair them with mentors for 3 months, and then they come to Austin in February to compete for $50,000 from all over the world. Last year we had people come from as far as Israel and Uganda and Colombia, and it is an incredible opportunity, so please spread the word. And I'm super excited to throw it over to Linda Barrios of Little Spoon, who's going to facilitate this panel and take it away.
Howdy y'all, happy afternoon. It's 2 o'clock, it's almost a sleepy hour, but we're gonna have a good time, I promise. First off, a huge thank you to the Capital Factory for hosting us, and to Food and City and Food and Tech for curating a really incredible food track for Austin Startup Week. Food world is so wildly different from tech companies or a lot of other startups, and it's so fantastic and encouraging to see a track dedicated to the food world. We'd love to see y'all tweeting, gramming, posting, use hashtag ASW16, but if you would kindly take right now to silence your mobile devices, even if that's like vibration. This is a hard floor, so even if your shiz is in your bag, it's gonna start vibrating. It's a thing. So please keep yourself silent during our time here today, except for the end, because we will have time for questions and Q&A towards the end of the panel. So if you've got things you're thinking of, please hold on to your questions until later on in the session. As for me, I'm Linda Barrios. I will be your host today. I own a company called Little Spoon Consulting. I work with startup and early stage food companies, helping them understand the retail landscape and coaching them through tools and strategies to be successful once they get there. So the CPG world, and especially the startup world, is definitely my world. That's my neighborhood. That's where I hang. And today we're going to be discussing rebrands and redesigns in the packaged food world. Brand is not just logo, it is not just packaging, it isn't just physical form, it is truly how your customers think, feel, and experience your product. And that can be a really delicate thing to mess with when you start digging into switching up the visual representation of your brand. For any company, rebrand and redesign is not an if, it is a when. I really couldn't tell you any company that has the exact same design or brand or look and feel as they had when they started. So hopefully this conversation will really illuminate best practices for moving through that process, how not to fail it, get some good insights from our panelists, tips, and hopefully get some good stuff for all of you. So we've tapped a pretty incredible set of minds to discuss this. I'm going to let each of our panelists introduce themselves, say who you are, your company, a little bit about what you do as related to design. It's Kelly Stevens, you can take it away. I'm just gonna let Mark. Okay.
I'm Kelly Stevens, and I have a company called 7 Creative. I live in the same neighborhood with Linda, which is, I don't make food, I will eat anything you give me. But I actually am a design company. I work with packaging, marketing materials, and just helping companies figure out how they're going to tell their story, what they look like. I, in a former life, spent 12 years as art director at Whole Foods Market. And so I take that experience and my just absolute crush on food companies and use that to help them further where they are and to really get their vision out there.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
No, of course.
This is going to be so much
Ladies,
fun.
it's going to be a long hour and a half. Let's go.
My name is Yas Berenji, and I'm co-owner of Skull and Cake Phones. We are Austin's first locally sourced vegan craft bakery.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, that's right, in the house.
And they badges.
Yeah, they badges. This batch is local. That's our other tagline. I am Chief Creative Officer as well as co-owner. My background in design stems way back. I was both a teacher at university for graphic and web design, and I also worked in advertising for about 15 years and did everything from working on Neiman's Marcus to Barnes & Noble to JCPenney. So I took everything that I've learned and built it into this company.
Badass.
Your turn.
I'm Martha Pinkoffs, and I got into the food world, not that Martha, which was a blog that I started many moons ago, it feels like now. And then I founded Hot Dang, which is a local grain burger company. And from there, I have gone on to start running Hat Creek Provisions, which is a local fermented vegetable company. So I've had a lot of wrangles with brand, and it's my favorite part of this. It's the coolest thing we get to do. Besides making really great food, the brand is everything. So
Love it. Thank you. Well, let's start off, Kelly. Since you're a designer, tell us maybe a few reasons why a company might decide to redesign or rebrand.
I think a lot of people get started with making something in their kitchen. They're really excited about it. Their friends tell them it's great, and then they start making it for more friends, and then all of a sudden they're becoming a brand, and they sort of have this out of control growth curve, and they go, oh shit, call Uncle Sammy. I think he knows how to run Microsoft Word. And Uncle Sammy can make our labels for us, and we'll just call the printer down the street and get labels made, and we'll just start sticking them on things, and they sort of end up on this train that they can't get off of.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think at some point they're starting to talk to retailers who don't want Uncle Sammy's labels anymore. They need a little bit more polish, and I'm careful with that word because it's not always about looking slick, but it's certainly looking like you know what the hell you're doing, and I think a lot of times a lot of brands don't. And so I find, I see a lot of the clients that I work with are going for what I call 1.0 to 2.0. So they've gotten on the train, they had the panic attack, they're like, oh my gosh, we have to figure out what we actually look like, what we sound like, what's our story. And then that's when I find it is when they're looking to grow up to 2.0. So I think it's a different story for everybody, but typically a rebrand is happening because they're looking to get into a bigger market, they're changing form factors. So, oh my gosh, we've decided we need to go from a tub to a bag because of shipping or cost. We've decided we need to expand, we've named it this, but we're actually selling more items. So there's a bunch of reasons why.
Mm-hmm. Martha, what was your experience starting
Hot Dang?
Hot Dang? Mm-hmm.
I love grocery stores. I've always loved going to grocery stores. I love the farmer's market and watching people kind of execute on their passion. The thing that I came to Hot Dang with is I knew I had the recipe, and I invested an inordinate amount of capital in the brand because I knew that I wanted to be taken seriously by retailers. And I think that single decision that I made to overinvest in the brand up front was probably the best thing that I did for myself, because it shortened the runway, it shortened the time between conversations of, hey, where can I find this, to, hey, can we get this for our store? Sure, great. It helped me be taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
So that was that was my.
You're an exception.
Yeah. But I'm a Libra, so I like things to look pretty. I mean, it's real. I always want it to be pretty. But it wasn't the best. It didn't communicate exactly what it needed to. And my 2.0 is right here. My 1.0 is beautiful. It's this gorgeous black box. It has lightning bolts. So a lot of the brand communication stayed, but we had things that we wanted people to see the product. People like to see what's in their food now. And I'm really proud of the ingredients that I put in it. So transparency is hard in the frozen food world. So my 2.0 was a real departure, and this was us going from local Texas brand to, hey, we want to be in all of the grocery stores. We don't want to just be in some of the grocery stores. And this got us into HEB. It got us into, it got our distribution where we wanted it to be. So it's invest in brand. I cannot say it enough. It will.
Can we go home now?
Yeah.
We're done, folks. Thank you.
There.
Well, for Skull and Cake Bones, we're about to go through a rebrand, actually. We've been in the process for the past 6 months, I would say, of building a new brand. And the reason being is because we went the very cute route. As a designer, it's kind of hard to be objective about your own company sometimes, because I know what I want it to look like, but it doesn't mean that that's what it should look like. So some of the problems that we've are trying to overcome is that people look at our packaging and think, oh, that's really cool, but when I ask them what the name of it is, they have no idea. So they're like, oh yeah, the one with the illustration. And that's not really a successful brand, because people look at it and it might, I mean, there are many variables as to why I find it to not be successful and why it needs a rebrand. One of them is that it's craft brown, which looks cool, right? It's sustainable, but it doesn't pop on a shelf. Also the craft brown, because we sell to sustainable type stores, melts into their branding. So there's so many variables that you have to be aware of, but the most important one for me is the ideology that form follows function. So it has to be functional, and what does it need to be functional? As a food brand, it has to sell. You have to build brand awareness as well as brand loyalty. Whereas when you're dealing with branding or advertising for something that's not CPG, you might have the collateral, or you might have the financial backing from a larger company, a top 100 company, to be able to do whatever it is you want, and be able to do it in such a large, what's the word I'm looking for, with a large push, that you will eventually dominate that market, right? When it's your own company and you're pulling dollars out of your own paycheck, you're like, okay, how are we gonna do this? You know, so.
Yes, I love your experience as both a designer and an owner, and you said it can be really challenging to stay objective through a redesign process. What are some of the ways that you really maybe checked yourself, or what were your kind of internal flags to make sure that you were being objective? Because it's hard to redesign your baby.
Yeah, well, for me, starting out, Skull and Cake Bones, it's not like, Sweet Baby's Bake Shop. It's got more of a hard edge, and that's what we wanted it to be. But the more our brand evolves, the more it becomes more of a creative endeavor, right? We're doing different, unique things, I think, anyway. So at first I was trying to go more of that hard edge thing with like that, flash tattoo look and feel. When really internally that wasn't necessarily my style. So in being objective, I'm paying attention more to my gut and what my gut is telling me to do for our company. And so that's hopefully what that rebrand will be.
That's awesome, thank you. Do you think, redesigns and rebrands, are they more customer driven or internally driven?
Oh, that's a good question.
Make Martha answer.
Can I
She ready?
It needs to be internal. Do not pivot based on what your customer is saying. I mean, listen to it, know that, hey, they want to see the food, take that feedback, but you have got, I think the most important part of brand, and this is brand like, not the cute logo on the box, but brand, the deep roots of the company. It's not just customer facing, it's your employees, it's everybody in relationship with your company is interacting with your brand. That's the roots. So it's got to come from you, it's got to come from the spirit of the company that you are putting into the world. So Hot Dang fundamentally is a company that wants to have fun. Like, natural food is boring, right? This is a space that's kind of boring, and the food sometimes doesn't taste that good. So to bring a black box in against the craft stuff is like, let's have fun with this. So it's by its own nature an extension of me and an extension of what I wanted to see in the world, and having that root and that relationship with brand and message and everything that comes with it, I think is the most important. Be open to the customer, give the customer like the stuff that they need to know, the information, but have it be reflective of who you are,
which is hard
in the world. Which is very hard
because especially as you're starting out, you want everyone's feedback to be relevant, right?
Right.
You're like, when we started at the farmer's market, someone was like, "Can you make it paleo?" And I was like, "I bet we can."
Should you?
But should you? Exactly, and you can, but it's going to be a $12 cupcake,
Right.
So as amazing as it would be to be paleo, vegan, all natural, local, etc., are you going to come back and buy that more than the one time? So yes, like Martha said, listen to your customer, but think about the internal is very important.
But be yourself.
Yeah, be yourself, because you are your brand.
Mm-hmm.
You do you, boo.
You do you, boo-boo.
It's real. Market research, is it worth it? Do you do it? Have y'all dabbled in that as you've explored kind of redesigns and rebrands on your own?
I think it's very important.
Mhm.
But I think it's important, but it goes back to the last question.
Mm-hmm.
You can't take all the feedback and try to analyze every single aspect and make everyone happy, but you can make a mass happy. So taking that market research with purpose, with intention. So if you're going to do a focus group, then what's the ultimate goal of that focus group? Is it just broad to get everyone's feedback? Hopefully not. You're going with intention. So just remember what your intention is. So if overall the feedback that you get answers your question of whether this works or not, then that's worth it.
Even through an internally driven process, what are some maybe channels or methods you would recommend for getting that kind of external feedback besides, focus groups or other kind of research?
I just ask people in grocery stores.
Right, so demos, sampling if you're already in
Or just
stores.
walking and shopping.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, hey,
Have you heard of that?
What you think
yeah,
about
do you
that?
like that? Why?
I do that all the time.
But I also go in and take, variations of the rebrand into the store to look at it on the shelf next to our product and other people's product, our competitors or not. And I ask everyone's feedback. People will be, making cupcakes and I'm like, hey, can you do me a favor and just come here real quick? Tell me what you think. Does that stand out to you? Yeah? No? Okay, great, thanks.
I heard someone, I was at a panel a couple weeks ago, and one of the other panelists said advice is dangerous, which I thought was, she said, I try not to ask for advice, I try not to ask for other people to influence me because it's dangerous in my process. And so I think having a firm set of filters in place for, especially if you're taking market research, your customer is only looking at what's available now. They're not dreaming of whatever crazy cupcake you have in your head, and they would just go, ugh. But then if they were to taste it or see it, they might have a different reaction to it. So I try to help my clients take any feedback they get and find their filters and put those firmly in place, and all feedback runs back through those filters before we decide that it's valuable or informative or it's anything we're gonna act on, because otherwise you would be making paleo cupcakes and losing your ass right now.
Losing my ass hard.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
Be one sexy cupcake though.
Yeah, that's a sexy $12 cupcake.
We would sell it in Nordstrom's.
I would like to design a solid gold box that goes in.
24K, 24 karat.
That's right.
I love that. Kelly, when you are working with brands that are trying to go from 1.0 to 2.0, how do you know that they need maybe a totally different story to tell versus just a new look and feel?
Was anybody here for the last panel? I think Emily hit on a lot of these points, is really figuring out who you are as a company, finding out what your voice is, what pieces of the story are most important to your company. Is there an origin story for how you developed? Is there an ingredient story? Is there a history? Are there things that we can draw from? And I think it's really careful to look at. It's really easy to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. You still have the lightning bolts on your packaging because you're like, yeah, ride or die,
That's
lightning
right.
bolts.
That's right.
And so I think you have to find those ride or die points in your company where you're like, those are the things that I really want to hang on to. I worked with a company that shall remain nameless, that had a heinous logo, but they were really hung up on this idea of this vintage signboard, almost like, imagine something that would hang over a pub, and they were really stuck on that concept. In order to kind of get them into the next century, we took the color palette that they had, we took the idea of a sign and modernized it. They had some funky lettering, I hand lettered the lettering, so we took pieces and drew it forward. Because that was important to them. It was part of their story. So I think it's finding, again, it's a filter to look through. You find the pieces of your brand that need to come with you and the pieces that really need to go, and that filter comes from the roots of your company and who you are and what story you have to tell. Fair enough?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, very fair.
When you're going all in on a redesign or a rebrand, that can be expensive. It can be
Big
very
time.
expensive. How do you kind of know maybe what cost-cutting measures are worth it and what aren't? Where are places that you might think about compromising when it comes to cost?
I mean, that is a
maybe there
really
aren't.
hard one.
Yeah.
Well, I think that this is the asset that the customer is going to touch and have an intimate relationship. They are bringing it home to their house. They're going to touch it. They're going to open it. They're going to look at it all day long. Don't skimp here. This is not the place to cut. But the website, like, maybe we don't ship product yet, so our web page is a little shitty, if you want to know the truth. Because we have not had the capital to invest in that part, because that's not as integral to what we do. But the part for our business, for CPG, is the thing that they touch, the thing that they have a relationship with, make it consistent with your brand and who you are and the experience that you want to give that person. Because they may only buy it one time, and that's your one shot to get them to go again, you know? And so if they have a bad experience, you have to go win that customer back or say goodbye to them forever. So I think that's my...
Yeah, and I just want to add something to that, to what you're saying is, so, wow, I forgot, come back to it. Hold on, it was so good.
Here, I'll talk over and you think for a second.
We're gonna be here for a while, so
Okay.
you just chime back in when you're ready.
You should jump up in the middle and be like, I got it! I call it getting the big stuff right. I think that could have easily have been in a stand-up pouch,
Yeah.
but you chose the jar for a reason. You could easily go a 4-ounce package or a 12-ounce package. Like, get the big stuff right. I can make a jar look pretty, I can make a bag look pretty, I can make a box look pretty, but if we've picked a form factor or a container that like sinks you financially, that doesn't ship well, that customers don't want to open because it feels icky, if you've made mistakes on the big stuff, there's not a color I can put on that to make it sell. So I think I call that getting the big stuff. Like, let's get the big stuff right. Is it refrigerated? Is it not refrigerated? Like, if we screwed that up, then it's all the designs for naught, basically.
I mean, because when you have CPG, you're engaging somebody with all of their senses. They are touching it, they're smelling it, they're looking at it, they're eventually going to put it in their mouth. It's a sensory experience, so don't leave out any of the senses. Think about it in a complete way.
Right, and I remembered, so yay me. To some extent, image is everything a little bit, meaning that you know you have a good product inside of it, that's already known, but how do you get people to try that product? So in some way you have to, whether it's subtly or out loud, scream to them, come and grab this. So that's why that branding, that package, that money is so important, because you have to, without being there to say, hey, try this, you have to do something with your packaging to get people to actually reach for that product so they can try the goodness on the inside, you know? So it is important to spend money on packaging, and that's a wrap.
Got it. Moving along. We talked a little bit about that kind of internal, external push. So really having redesigns, rebrands driven from an internal perspective. So internally, can y'all talk to me a little bit about how you go about finding consensus and feedback from your internal stakeholders as you're moving through this process, and doing so, I'm sure, with an angle on efficiency as well?
That part can be a little bit hard, because you're dealing with personalities, and if you're a founder, it's a little bit easier because you're the captain of the ship. If you're coming into a company and telling them that their baby needs to go to
Their baby's ugly.
beauty school, then that is a little bit harder of a message to deliver. But I think driving it all down to core values, identifying core values, a lot of what Emily talked about in terms of archetypal branding as a filter to use, like settling on some metrics to get everybody on the same page that aren't personal, right? Like depersonalizing it a little bit and saying, okay, but this isn't really what we're trying to do as an innocent brand. This isn't really an innocent brand. What if we revisited it with that lens? Makes it a little less personal, a little easier to tolerate.
Definitely. Can you just touch on briefly a little bit about archetypal branding for anyone that wasn't in the room for the last panel as well? I know that's something that has so strongly influenced your design through Hot Dang and Hat Creek.
Totally.
If you could just touch on that briefly, because I think it's a really cool core point.
Archetypal branding is something that I am hook, line, sinker, love everything about. But there are 12 archetypes as defined by Carl Jung, and then as reinterpreted by Joseph Campbell, and then some other people have actually taken it to marketing and unpacked it for the brand folks. But we're all on a hero's journey. Everybody here is on a hero's journey. This is part of who we are as human beings. Is we want to do good, we want to make an impact, we want to achieve. And so there are these stories like Star Wars. Like, there's something in Star Wars that resonates. That's the hero's journey. And it hits everything in us because it's like, yeah, there's a call to adventure, and then it's hard as shit, and then you win something. And that's kind of what life is, right? So that is the lens that I use, and in particular, Hot Dang, because it is an extension of me, is a magician brand. So what you see is not necessarily what you get. It's a veggie burger that tastes good. It's oatmeal that works in the toaster. There's some element of surprise in all layers of Hot Dang. That's the lens that I run Hot Dang through. And then Hat Creek Provisions is an innocent brand that I've had so much fun building, because the innocent journey is all about a return to Eden. And we all want to believe that there is this place that we can go back to where things are easy and beautiful and wonderful. And it's true, but it's not going to be forever. So it's a touch to that. So we took what was a derivative of the Burger Company brand, which is super appropriate for them, and took it to more of a restorative sort of nod to the past, like an old seed pack. And this is an innocent brand. So if you look at our social media and our messaging and that kind of thing, you'll see that both companies are executing that archetypal filter.
So sorry to pick on you. I'm really interested. I really wanted to speak specifically about that shift from Hat Creek and that kind of Western look and feel to something that is innocent and considerably more elegant and upscale. What were some challenges that you found in taking a brand from one to something that is so different?
Well, the truth is, Hat Creek Provisions is a collaboration between Hat Creek Burger Company founder Drew Gressett and Strangely and Brewing Company founders Tim Klatt and Adam Blumenshine. And I think that they used the Hat Creek brand on it, the Burger Company brand on it, because they had the assets. It's like, hey, let's do that. That's easy. But it wasn't it's consistent with Burger Company. This is actually a totally different entity and needed to be treated as such. And they were totally open to the process. They'd already been sort of using the archetypal brand on Burger Company, so they got that there was a departure there, and it makes it easier to. I mean, this is a local brand and this is a national brand. It's
Clearly so.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me pick on you a minute.
One more thing though on this. This in our stores, our same store sales with a price increase, we more than doubled what we were selling on the shelf. So don't underestimate it. It matters.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you, Martha.
Yeah.
Yalis, as you're moving through redesign here with Skull and Cake Bones, as you were kind of beginning that process, could you maybe talk to us about your decision-making process, about what to really overhaul and what to keep?
Well, there's certain elements, kind of like the lightning bolt. We also use the lightning bolt because we're soul sisters.
You're also magic.
You're magic.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go redo my cards now.
There are certain elements that we wanted to keep. To be honest, we're getting rid of a lot of it. Because what's most important about our brand isn't necessarily the brand elements, it's the philosophy behind the brand, the idea of working together. So everything that we do is locally partnered in that we try to highlight another local company's product by putting it into our food. But we also co-brand with that company because the idea is that we're all trying to get to the same end goal. So we can either see each other as competition or we can work together hand in hand and walk to the finish line together. And as much as we say Austin, not Austin's first locally sourced vegan craft bakery, people weren't necessarily seeing that on the brand. Even though I thought you could see it. I'm like, it's right there, why don't you see it? But because, you know, we're using less saturated colors, we're using a craft bag, you know, we're doing things that are low light to create that craft feeling. It wasn't visible. So for me to do that rebrand or to think about the elements to keep, it was more so what are the elements that are most important for people to see. And so that's how that rebrand is being developed. Is what's the first thing you see? Great, you know the name of the cupcake? Fantastic. Let's move on to the next thing. You know?
Yeah.
Because those are important things.
Yeah.
Like Skull and Cake Bones. Oh yeah, you guys do those cupcake things. Like, no, I want you to tell me. You see the garden pack and you know it's made with Johnson's Backyard Garden.
Yeah. Kelly, as you are looking at redesigning or rebranding a company, what's your decision-making process or your filter for kind of what to overhaul, what to keep?
I think I sometimes piss my clients off because we spend a lot of time they're like, show us stuff. And I'm like, nope, we're not at the show me stage yet. We're going to talk a little bit more about who you are. We're going to really build that brand vision. So really figuring out, again, their archetype, what's their voice, what do we deem most important, what things are secondary. So I try to find hierarchy in their messaging. I try to find hierarchy in their story and then work from there. So that's the filter that we use. And I think it's the front end process is so heavy to get it right. But I think it really serves in the long run to stop and say, okay, we've built this message, and you just sort of, I'm like, let's throw this at our core brand and see if it sticks. And we throw it, and you're like, you know what, we're this, soft seed pack design. I think I want to do something neon green for you. We throw it against the brand, and it's like, that don't stick. Hot Dang's won't pick it right up because they're all about the hot colors. Yeah. And so I think that's, a really simplistic example of how you can say, all right, so this is who we say we are. What does that look like? What does it sound like? What does it smell like? What is the voice that it uses? What is its tone? So I think figuring out who you are first, and then sort of using that always as your filter, always as your checkpoint. Go back to it and say, yes, no, maybe, and sort of categorize that. And then we start talking about, all right, well, you said you're this, this, and this. What does that look like? What shape does that take? What story does it tell? And so I think it's spending a lot of time on that front end.
That's such a crucial point, and certainly in my experience, a lot of companies, brands, especially startups, I think they vastly underestimate how important that front end preparation and all the work you really do before you have a true visual is.
I'm not doing my job if I haven't really pissed you off at some point where you're like, just give me a bag, and I'm like, I'm winning. I'm winning because you want a bag and we're not there yet.
Do you think that that's the thing brands struggle with the most, or where do you see the real pain points in that process?
I think when I walk through the stores of certain stores, you walk through and you're like, oh, your baby's ugly. Your baby's really, I shouldn't call you, but it's really hard to call somebody and tell them their baby's ugly. When they've come to you and sat down and say, hey, is my baby ugly? They've opened the door for me a little bit more. But I think getting in your own way is a lot of it. That having to really say, and that's why I think checking in with that big message and building the consensus with the team, like taking them along with you. When you get to the point of we're ready to figure out what stays and what goes, if you've carried them along, there's a lot less pain point, and there's a lot less of getting in their own way, and at that point they've become a little more objective about their baby. And so as you start to make the shifts, they'll come along with you a lot easier.
Yas, could you talk about maybe some best practices or strategies that you've had to employ through design, redesign, that have really helped you move through that process a lot easier?
Is it easy? Yes.
Is it easy?
Yeah.
How do you get over those humps?
Well, it's more difficult because I'm really dealing with myself and one designer. So as far as best practices, I just have to keep reminding myself that trust my gut, right? Even though I try to treat it like I'm an agency working on this brand, because I don't want to be so emotional about it. Even though I want to have some emotional aspect about it, because I have to remind myself I know what I'm doing. Like, I've been doing this for a while now, and that's not an insecurity. It's just because I don't want to be proud of it, but people not see what needs to be there. So that's probably my hardest struggle, to be quite honest. But as far as best practices, I go back to market research. Because for me it's important, because that's been such a struggle for us, is people not recognizing the philosophy of the company. So I just go back to the stores and I put it back on the shelf and I see if people notice. I see if people tell me the things that I need them to see. And if it works, then it's working.
External information and internal decision making.
Yeah, because we're not a large company. It's not like I can walk around to 100 employees and say, you know, like, hey, what do you think? You see that? What's the first thing you
The
think of?
dogs
You know,
don't count.
the dogs, yeah.
Do not count.
How about the cats?
Yeah.
Don't count either.
Yeah, they count in some ways. But so as far as that, you know, that's my best practice is just going around, talking to people, seeing what they think. I think the more opinions to some degree, the better, because I don't want to. There are so many times in my life where I've done something and I'm so focused on the details that I forget the big picture, right? Or I'm so focused on the big picture I forget about the small things like, well, shit, that's got the wrong UPC on it, and we just printed 10,000 of them. You know?
That's real.
It's real. It happens,
It's
and you're
real.
like, well, that's just money down the drain. That felt good.
Yeah.
You know? So it's just getting as many eyeballs on it as possible, and that's where we're at right now. Is like I'm like, okay, I need 20 more people to look at this. Make sure the UPC is right. Make sure the ingredients are right. Make sure it's, you know, you just gotta do that before you do it, because it's an expense, and you don't want to do it twice. You already know you're gonna rebrand again,
Yeah.
right? You know your brand's gonna evolve. It should evolve. If it doesn't evolve, that's a bad thing, right? Even if it just involves in the slightest. Even if it's just like you went from a less saturated color to a more saturated color. Look at UPS, right? That's a perfect example. They evolved, and they don't have to evolve, technically.
Yeah.
But just eyeballs, as many eyeballs as possible. I've got like 500 copies of Bing Bongs on my wall behind me. You know,
Could you just clarify what a Bing Bong is for anyone that doesn't know?
a Bing Bong is your best friend between the hours of midnight and 3 a.m.
Yeah.
It's a play on a Hostess cupcake. And why it's called a Bing Bong is because we thought they were called ding dongs before we realized they were actually Hostess cupcakes. And it wasn't until after we launched the brand that someone was like, I'm pretty sure that's a Hostess cupcake. I was like, no, it's a ding dong.
What's a ding dong
The
then?
ones that
The
wrapped
ding
in
dong is the
foil.
one wrapped in foil.
Wrapped in foil.
Oh,
Right.
it worked for me.
Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, well, it's not a ding dong, it's a bing bong. Because I'm so clever. And
You are clever.
so
Very
it's
clever.
chocolate cake filled with vanilla buttercream, and then we dip it in seriously chocolate. They're dark chocolate. We make a ganache, and then we do the loop-d's. But we do 3. We do 3 loop-d's instead of 4.
Get that right. Don't get sued.
That's how we're different. I mean, we all ripped off Hostess, right? As soon as they were done, we're like, yeah, let's go.
I love it. I know something that a lot of young brands starting out, especially if they're doing kind of the local specialty natural thing, is having kind of a host of product differentiators. You know, you said yourself, you are a local, vegan, craft bakery, co-branding. There's just a lot of stuff to
A lot
put
of
on a
stuff.
label. Can y'all each maybe walk me through sort of what your process is for determining that hierarchy of what to really put on a label?
I can't stand those labels. I don't know why, but a lot of them are. So for hot dang, it was so much in the this free, that free category. Like when you go to the veggie burger category, it's all about what's not in it. So I actually just did the opposite and said
Right.
what is in it, and didn't really. I mean, non-GMO was a foundation. Like that is a point of difference that was crucial to the founding, and so was soy, because everything had soy in it then. But then beyond that, it's just like it was too much free. I wanted to talk about what was actually in the product.
I think that's really powerful.
I mean,
We just try to be really careful with where we place the things that we're going to say. So we don't say all of it on the packaging, but we may say some of it on the packaging, and then say some of it on our business cards, and then say some of it on the website. So we're just, you know, like there's only so many words that you can say without it's just being,
Buttons
you
or
know, like one of
pictures.
these things on your packaging. Yeah, you know, and it's like non-GMO, vegan, we love you. You
Word
know?
fight.
Please buy me. You know, there's just only so many things, so you just have to be really smart about where you place your words and when to say the words that matter, because sometimes where you're selling it also helps people know the type of product that you're
Right.
selling.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to scream vegan if you're on the shelf that says vegan.
Yeah, if you're in a vegan only store, you don't need to say, I mean, we honestly don't say the word vegan very often. It's vegan. Which as a hashtag looks like shit's vegan, which is even better. Right? But the vegan part is very quiet because veganism is still very, it can be a dirty word to some people sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we usually let people eat it, and then I come back and say, P.S. that shit's vegan. And then they're like, what? And I'm like, I know. And
The whole thing out of it. They freak out, you freak out. Yeah. Everyone has a good time, everyone gets a
Yeah.
cupcake.
So vegan isn't on our packaging really. If it is, it's very tiny in the shit's vegan part.
Nice. Kelly, what about you? As you're working with a multitude of companies, how do you kind of filter through what that hierarchy is?
So part of it is, again, coming back to what's most important, making their own personal hierarchy, but I try really hard. I'm a closet copywriter, so I try really hard. If there's something I have to say, like natural juices, nut milks, things like that, they settle out unless you put all kinds of icky crap in them. So I'm working with companies that aren't putting the icky crap in them, so their stuff settles out. So there's fun ways you can say stuff like, I need to tell you to shake it well, right? Somewhere on there, it needs to be well shaken. It needs to, before it's consumed, it needs to be refrigerated. But I try to find cute ways or fun ways to bring the brand personality through stuff that has to be there. So I think sometimes how you say something is just as important as what you say. Malk, who's in Houston, I did not do their stuff, but it's rad because on top of their lid it says, shake really, really well. And so you get this like fun, punchy bit of their brand through them telling you to do something. It's a very simple command, shake well. Or to be able to make I'm working with a popsicle company right now, and they use all seasonal flavoring. So if they have a strawberry pop in the middle of winter, those strawberries might not be as bright red. And so they're like, what do we do? How do we let people know? And so on the back, we came up with a cute line that's something like, it's only seasonal, color and flavor may vary depending on what time of year. And so trying to find ways to communicate the things you want your customers to know that are important. I don't want you to pull out a pop from last week and it be bright red, and this week they're a little bit less red, and you're like, oh, the quality standards. You're like, no, actually the quality is great because it's this beautiful natural berry that we picked, down the street. But finding ways to give the voice or give the story through stuff that has to be there, but just like it's clever.
It's clever.
It might look a little bit better as a hashtag. Let's talk a little bit about brand extensions. Most companies coming up that are brand new and starting up, they tend to start with one core product or kind of product, and then hopefully diversify their product mix a little bit. Martha, can you talk to us a little bit about how you've gone through kind of design changes or differences between core products and then an extension of that line?
So the core product is the veggie burger line, and they're all black boxes with the color band being the differentiator. And early on, I knew I wanted to play with the recipe works really well to go to sweet, sort of breakfast, desserty type profiles. And so I knew years ago that I wanted to make this line, which is our breakfast toaster line. And naming this line was like, you're naming something that hasn't existed before, so to like really
There ain't no market research for that.
No,
There's no market research
There was
for that.
legitimately a moment in which Martha and I stood in the aisles of Whole Foods staring agape at the frozen breakfast section going,
what is it? It's
It
not
ain't
a waffle. But I want to take those waffle buyers. I'm sure about that. But it's not a waffle, and it kind of is oatmeal, but it's like waffle and an oatmeal had a baby, which is way too much for this.
You can't call it waffle, it's too complicated.
And so we landed on breakfast toaster, and I think we may actually iterate a little bit further and say toastable oatmeal because it's new, we have to be very direct with the customer and say, this is what it is. Toastable, you put it in the toaster. Oatmeal, like that's what's in this box, which is weird, but people are getting it. And so while this is where it all started, this is where the bigger opportunity is in the grocery store for us, truthfully, because a lot more people shop for frozen breakfast than shop for veggie burgers. And we knew that pretty early on too. So we got to cut our teeth in a category that doesn't turn as well and set our sights on something where we could be disruptive and really innovate. So the order of it worked out to our benefit because we learned a lot about being in the grocery business on hot dang, this will always be like something that I love and am very proud of. And then we get to iterate and we get to learn more about what the company is. And does it run through the magician filter? Yes. I mean, this is a magical thing. To put oatmeal in your toaster and then it comes out and you eat it like that, that's badass. So it frees us to innovate in other parts of the grocery store in a way that's very exciting. And they talk to each other, but they're not identical by any means. We left the black box behind because when we went to the store and held it up against the set, we're going to sit next to waffles. So this needs to jump out of that category. And back when we started this, there were no other black boxes in the market. Now there are black boxes in the market. But this jumps out off the shelf. So it's been really fun to see this come to fruition and go into grocery stores and have strangers buy it and build a relationship with it. And we've seen a significant change in our engagement with our online people because we are innovating and giving them something different. They're engaging with us differently. So it's neat. It's amazing.
So from a design perspective, was there anything else that you really sought to change and shift as you extended that brand? Was that color really the huge part?
I knew I wanted the color for sure. Because I like that loud color.
Frozen breakfast is white.
Yeah, it's boring.
Yeah, it's so boring.
It's so boring.
Yeah,
it really
it's
is.
terrible.
Yeah. No disrespect to.
No.
Yeah.
No shade.
But so we built a great relationship with the designer on this, and they got to know us and who we are. So a lot of the success that we had in the rebrand was knowing what we wanted to communicate and then getting out of the way and letting them take our very clear knowledge of who we are and interpret it, because they're talented with
From
that.
y'all mouth to God's ears.
Yeah, I mean,
That's rare.
Yeah, but it's not. I mean, when people micromanage the design process, they get in the way of the art.
But most people don't recognize that.
True.
Even in life in general, right?
But you build a relationship with the designer that you respect and you admire their work, so you're already drawn to them. So get out of their way. Tell them what they need to know and let them work.
I always say nothing ruins a design worse than compromise. Because if I've made you happy and you've got your little widget and your little widget's on there too, and you love pink and so it's pink, but you also love, lime green and stuff with some lime green on it, and by the time you've gotten to the bottom of it, you're not communicating clearly anymore.
That shit's hypercolor at that point.
I want that shirt. The hypercolor shirt.
Yes, you've also done some brand extensions within Skull and Cake Boat, starting with your core product of cupcakes and extending out into some other really delicious things. Can you talk to us a little bit about how you extended your design or considerations that you made as you were beginning to create other products, especially ones that looked nothing like what you were doing before?
What do you mean?
I think about your tea biscuits.
Oh, the tea
You introduced
biscuits.
tea
Yeah.
biscuits, like nothing like a cupcake. Martha had something in a frozen box that also went into something in a frozen box. But you really innovated and created a different set of products that was entirely different.
Well, yeah, you start to learn as you work within your company, and you start to, when you're a small company, you're doing all the demos as well. So you start to see things and how people think and how people shop. So you start to think about, okay, well, this is what's happening here, but I don't see anything like this over here, so maybe we can make something for over here. But with the tea biscuits, so our tea biscuits are called Posh Tea Biscuits, and they're made with Revolution Gin, and it's called a gin and juice. because there's got to be a little bit of fun in there for me. So it's our gin and juice tea biscuits, but it looks very different from the design of the cupcakes or the trifles, and that's because it's got the word posh in it. So if it's posh, it's got to feel posh. But even that's going to go to a whole different level hopefully soon, very soon with this rebrand. But everything that we're doing, because of the market research that I've done, and because I am constantly talking to consumers. If you email info, it's coming to me. If you email jobs, it's coming to me. If you email anything Skull and Cake Bones, it's coming to me. Because most people are like, you deal with it. So I get to talk with consumers all the time, and as we're in the process of opening our storefront, I leave the door wide open so people can come in and I can talk to them.
Where's your storefront gonna be?
Dripping Springs, close to Dripping Springs. It's gonna be 290 West, Southwest Austin, close to where all the breweries are, but just before Tito's Vodka. No Deep Eddy, just kidding.
Yeah.
Other big fun.
Other
company.
big one.
The other big guy in town.
Yeah, Deep Eddy. So just talking to people and what they perceive and what they know are two very different things. So I don't know if I answered your question at all, to be quite honest.
You had some great words to say.
That's good.
Yeah, no, you're killing it. You're doing great. I was just thinking
Myself.
specifically about,
I'm out.
ways maybe you made that core connection from a product that was so different and in a different part of the store, even from cupcakes to cookies. Like, what were some ways that you kept that consistent or recognizable for your customer?
Well, just maintaining the specific elements, right? We've got texture, and we've got the lightning bolts, and we've got, typography, and we've got color palettes. So keeping all of that so that people look at it and go, I think that might be Skull and Cake Bones. And then you have that mysterious aspect of them looking further into it. Our tea biscuits aren't in a lot of places right now, so I haven't been as concerned about it, to be quite honest, but they are going to be soon.
Yeah.
So
Awesome.
I've been waiting on the rebrand to get that out there, because there's only so much I can do at once.
Yeah, you got a lot going on.
Preach.
It'll get there when it gets there.
Don't worry about it right now.
We've talked a little bit about kind of the gnarly process of moving through a rebrand and redesign. Kelly, can you talk to us a little bit about how you go about maybe clarifying expectations around timeline for a process of this magnitude? Because it's a process.
It's a process.
And it's got magnitude.
Yep. And
It
like
takes
I
time.
said, and at the beginning, you're not making nothing to look at, and it freaks
Yeah.
everybody out. I really like to start at the end, and once we've determined what the form factor is, so is it a jar, is it a box, you can put some really hard dates around calling a box company and having them say, I cannot deliver that to your doorstep for 8 weeks. So you start there. And you're like, okay, we're here. If you guys decide that you want to make 85 edits, then we're going to be here. And if we think that we're going to move through this design process in a certain amount of time, then we're going to be here. If we think that we're going to spend this amount of time really, depending on how well locked down their brand is, if it's brand new, if we're having to craft that sort of vision statement for the company, well then let's back up to here. And so I try to start as far forward as I can and move backwards, and then be really realistic about what's possible. And then depending on the number of people at the table, I'm working with a company right now that have a lot of big loud voices at the table, and I'm like, so if you need me to listen to all of these big loud voices 7 times at every revision, we're going to talk about what that looks like for your timeline. So I think there is a sense of reality there. Back to sort of how we set up internally, I try to get them to find a core person or a core team in a big company, and it's like, if this is Martha's company, all information goes to her. Martha is the filter, and she's the only one that I really want to talk to, because she is clarifying that vision for me, and that is the most crystalline version of her brand that I'm gonna get. So I think finding that place in the process moves some of those pieces along more quickly. But there's a lot of reality to a rebrand, that it just takes time. If I can't, I know you can speak to this, if you ain't got time to sit down in front of the computer and write me back, or we can't find a time to meet, then that's gonna slow your process down. So I
Fast,
think
good, or cheap, right? Pick two.
that is my favorite.
Yeah, I
Did
mean,
you hear?
honestly.
Fast, good, or cheap.
That should have been the
You
name
get
of this
to-
panel.
Right,
Yes.
fast, good, or cheap. Pick
Missed an
two.
opportunity there.
And so I think we also talk about thorough. I'm working with a company right now, and she's like, look, I'm in like deep dire straits. We are going to be out of packaging in 6 weeks. And I'm like, rad. no custom bags for you because we can't get them in time. We can get pre-made bags and we can sticker them. We can do the best damn sticker that we can, but no custom dies because we don't have time for that. So I think it also depends on what we're trying to solve for. This is with her, it's a get her out the door. Like she just needs to get out the door and get out the door quickly. And then we're gonna come back and figure out like 2.A and say like, okay, you've got your marketing meeting set up, you're talking to vendors, you're moving forward, now let's get the real stuff right. So I think that there's a couple different ways to dice up a timetable sort of depending on what they're looking at, what real pieces have to happen, and then where we're actually trying to get right now.
Yeah, there's
That's
a lot of
vague answer, but
there's a lot of crucial pieces of information there. As someone that works with a lot of startup and kind of younger and emerging companies, what else do you wish that they would come to the table with ready to share with you so that you didn't have to go digging for maybe crucial pieces of information or details to help you process?
I don't want them to come to the table with a lot. I like for it to be a vision process, like it's the vision quest. I like going through that process because, like you said, getting your designer getting to know you is a whole lot of it. If they just sit down and they're like, this is what I wanted, this is my favorite color, and this is the typeface, I'm like, sweet, you've told me what to do, but I don't know anything about you, and so when I get to a point and I have to make a decision about something, I have no information, I've got no backstory to like help me make the right decision for you. So I like for that to be a process, but I think the more clarity you can get about what your company's about, what your core vision is, where you want to be in 5 years, those are the pieces that it's like they're really amorphous, but we can take them and drill them down into a design.
Some good stuff, thank you. Let's talk about kind of determining what. So thinking about rolling out, a redesign or a rebranded product, how do you kind of determine the best timeline to do that in terms of launching?
Don't do it at the holidays.
Yeah, that's excellent.
Yeah, definitely don't do it at the
Don't do it
holidays.
at the holidays.
Oh God, no.
Just don't do anything during
Don't
the
do anything
holidays. Yeah, not all my friends.
Go home during the holidays.
Yeah, absolutely.
Enjoy your family
Mm-hmm.
or something.
But would you think about basing that, on a season or around a certain event? Like, are there other kind of cues that you might take externally that would help you determine when the best time to birth your new baby would be?
If you have a big customer that you're working with, like for me, Whole Foods is a big customer and they're on a review schedule. So I have an opportunity 3 months before regional launches or a global launch to get in the room with my buyer and say, hey, I'm going to present to you, this is our new packaging, this is what we're thinking of showing, and that way the conversation has happened with the buyer, you have included them in it, and there's a natural relaunch. And so then, that's how I'm review sensitive on that stuff.
Yeah. So syncing with the review schedules of your retail partners.
Yeah, exactly.
You have them. Mm-hmm.
Or if you have,
knowing they've got one.
if you're going from Texas to a bigger section of the U.S., that's a great time to make any changes you're going to make. If there's about to be any major growth happening, that's a great time to touch the brand.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I think that there's any flavor profiles that are happening. Launching a strawberry flavor in December is silly because in the fall we all know all we eat is pumpkin spice. Just pumpkin spice. We also don't want to launch pumpkin spice in March. So I think there's that piece of it. If you're doing any kind of body care or supplements and you're thinking about going into, actually Emily touched on this earlier, if you're thinking about going into holiday shows, if you want to be in a custom shelf or some part of a holiday display in a retail environment like Whole Foods, if you want to get promoted in a magazine, you need to think about their schedules. So they're going to do holiday shows in the summer because they're getting ready. They'll be, by the time fall hits, Christmas is planned. Christmas was planned in July. So I think that's, so that's another thing if you're backing it up that way. I remember when I worked at Whole Foods trying to get fall and winter fruits to shoot for the holiday shoot, which happens in July. It's just kind of ridiculous. Everyone's like, yeah, pomegranates? No, we don't have pomegranates right now. You're like, but please, what do you want us to do? Like, yell at the trees until they produce a pomegranate? So I think yes, please. Thinking seasonally about if there's anything that'll impact, the places you want to be promoted, the places that you want to sell into. I'm trying to think of any other real
Trade shows.
Thank you.
We launched this at a trade show. Expo West is the biggest trade show. So if you're going to make any of those changes, you're going to see all of your buyers at that trade show. Don't relaunch your brand in April. Relaunch it in March at that trade show, because that's your opportunity to say to the world, hey, we changed some things. Look how pretty we are now. I mean, I think Expo's a great way to do it. Yeah.
What, maybe you guys can walk me through what kind of communication some of these either retailers, distributors, other partners you might have within the supply chain expect when it comes to relaunching a product, which is essentially what you do when you are redesigning and rebranding. How do you kind of mitigate that piece?
I bring them into the process a little bit. This Whole Foods is Hat Creek Provisions' biggest customer, and they were really supportive of the rebrand. If you're making a significant improvement on what you're putting on the shelf, they are going to be stoked about what you're doing.
Benefits everybody.
Yeah, so I just try to bring them into it a little bit, because you don't want to surprise them. That happens, and that's not good.
Surprises aren't fun unless
Yeah.
it's your birthday. And there's
Yeah.
baby kittens involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I think we can open up the floor to some questions at this point. If there's anything you guys are thinking of, holler. Yes, ma'am.
So when it comes to like labeling on packaging, you know how like it can cost a lot of money to be able to get like the organic stamp or this and that, and there's a lot of them out there. And like, can you kind of like instead put, you know, the carrots are organic and the ingredients and certain things, like where would you say to really spend the money on the stamps in the beginning when you are on a tight budget? Like, are there any that you've seen that you're like, really definitely get the gluten-free or really get the organic even though it's in the ingredients? Or
You need the certification.
correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, to be able to put those on.
So it depends on who your target is.
Yeah.
We use mostly organic ingredients on Hat Creek Provisions, but haven't been able to afford to go through that labeling process. Also, we don't want to force our farmers that do sustainably grow to bear the burden of that and ruin that relationship. So that's that decision. But because we are intent to grow with Whole Foods and they have a deadline on non-GMO verification, that we're spending time and money on non-GMO, because that one is,
It'll affect your business.
it's going to start to affect your business. And then when we can afford organic and when we can afford to help our farmers achieve organic, then we'll go through that. And I don't know if that's the smartest way to do it or not, but that's the way that we can afford to do it right now. And I am going to change the label. Like, one of the edits that we're making to the label is we are going to say that we use organic carrots, organic cabbage, all, because what's organic you need to get credit for.
Yeah.
Right.
And you can do that.
And I did the same thing with hot dang in the
And you're
beginning.
spending all that extra money
Yeah.
for organic.
And
Exactly.
we're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
We put on our ingredients, at the very bottom it says asterisk denotes organic. And so anytime you go through and see those ingredients, you see an organic, you see an asterisk, that means it's organic, but we also put never artificial, just to kind of help to build that we're not using, even our food coloring we make from scratch in-house. So, but yeah, we don't have the funds to be able to go and get the organic, the non-GMO, same thing. We're gonna have that because it's gonna affect our business. But
if
the
you're-
organic
yeah.
part is, it'll get there when it gets there.
If your company is grounded in gluten-free, like that's what you're selling is gluten-free, then I think that would be one that would be worth it.
Right.
There's so much noise and there's so much money out there that it's like, we investigated, like, this stuff is paleo, vegan, blah, 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 all the stuff, you know? And it's like, I have a hard time.
But also, do I have to tell you that
It's
a carrot
vegetables,
is Thank you. It's a carrot.
yeah, I don't know.
What do we have in I had a panel earlier this morning, and one of the gentlemen on the panel, he makes just vegetable pasta noodles. And he said that he just completely eschewed any of the other differentiators besides certified organic, because that was the thing they were. Because if you can't eat vegetables, there's probably something wrong with you and not him.
That is a problem.
Like, he's like, it's just vegetables. So he completely just got rid of everything except for that organic certification, which being just a single ingredient was a lot more important to him.
There's one more thing that I want to say. Just be careful with what you put on the front
Yeah.
of the
Yeah.
label.
I was gonna say there's a whole compliance piece to
Yeah.
also be aware of there as well. And I'm sure Kelly has seen a lot of this too, working with small companies. Just because you think you can slap non-GMO or organic, cures cancer,
Yeah, you cannot
any
do
of that
that.
stuff on your label, doesn't mean that you can't. That, mhm.
I would say I'll toss in, if you have grain in your product, non-GMO is the place to go and the place to start. It is expensive and it takes for freaking ever. But if you have a grain, your case in point, but if you have a grain and that's part of your core, if you're looking to be in the natural realm, which I think was most of us sort of, that's our home and we know best, non-GMO is absolutely the first place to start.
Okay.
Don't ever say natural anymore.
Yeah.
As the art director of Whole Foods, who spent 12 years putting all natural ingredients on all of the packaging that my predecessor is now having to go back and revise, there's also lawsuits occurring around the claim of natural. It used to mean something. I think people used to have an understanding, but now that we're starting to parse out what natural means, I think it's you need to be a little more careful and also a little more specific about what that means. So I think that it's, all vegetable colorings or finding other ways to talk about natural. I think the concept is still huge for buyers, but I think the way we talk about it has to change. But I think calling out your organic ingredients and finding other ways to talk about natural is
Just to
really
give you
so
the,
important.
sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah,
The
no.
flip side of that, I was working on Pilgrim's Pride Chicken back in I think 99 or 2000. And we used to say all natural.
Not vegan.
That shit was not all natural. That wasn't even close to natural.
That's definitely something to be aware of too,
Yeah, so-
for sure.
For Martha, on the pickles, how did you approach selling that in Texas versus where I'm from, Midwest Milwaukee? The preferences are going to be different for people where I grew up sometimes than down here or in California. If you're making a brand or rebrand nationwide, how do you approach that with customers, maybe different preferences, different buying patterns in different parts of the U.S.?
We are just learning about it because when we did the rebrand, we were still only in Texas. So it's been a little bit of a controlled experiment. The first that the people outside of Texas are seeing is the refresh, which was part of the strategy. So it's going to be interesting. I don't know yet how it's going to shake out.
Thanks.
You got, yes, people, questions, thoughts, bring it
I was
on.
wondering if anyone in the group has personally or knows someone who has gone through a complete name change and how they were able to manage taking their loyal customer base and also exciting their product that's continuing on to a new space,
Right.
and how to create excitement but still not confuse everyone.
Right.
Take it away, Kelly Stevens.
I feel like people find me for this reason. Like, God, it's so hard. I do my best if you're a new company to stop you in your tracks and be like, they're like, oh, we have this thing that's called this. And I'm like, oh, but this is such a better name. So if I can catch you in your tracks, great. If you're already on the shelf, this is the dorkiest thing I could say, but I'm a huge fan of the sticker that says new name, same great flavor. Because at that point, you can't go print most people can't go print 10,000 labels that call that out. At some point, you'd like to just transition to your new label, but also you have to carry those people over. I think it's just a command decision you make based on who you're like, this is who we are, this old name is baggage, it needs to go, and we're gonna toss it out, and we're just gonna commit to selling the hell out of our new name. And then finding little ways, like I worked with a salsa company, and we absolutely transitioned everything and started putting stickers on top of her lids that are like, we used to be da-da-da, we're now da-da-da, same great flavor. And I think at some point it's a bite the bullet. I think before you do it, just make sure that you're 700% sure that that's what you want to do, and then get 700% behind it. And just go like hell. I think being connected back to your vendors, being connected to your, the people that are selling for you, if you've got distributors, if you've got retailers, keeping them in the flow, giving them any materials they need. If you can, in each box that you ship out, toss a handful of signs in there that say same great, anything you can do to support them in supporting you in your transition, I think is really huge. and bringing them along and making sure that everybody's like, hey, we're doing this. You want to do this with me? Okay, we're gonna. And so really being sure and getting all the buy-in along the way, so that someone's like, hey, I'm looking for such and such on the shelf, and your retailer knows exactly to be like, oh, well, they're this now. Here they are.
Have you ever full on recommended that someone completely rebrand, rename everything?
Depends on how big they are, I would assume.
Yeah, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do it next week.
Yeah.
This company had a name that was like hell to spell. Half of it was Latin, half of it was German. Precious. What? Why are there so many Y's in? They couldn't understand what's happening. There's a lot of consonants, and they're like, oh, well, we also have this other idea for this other product. Actually, I'll help them. They had another name, and they're gonna name their new product Mindful Mana. And I'm like, they're like, yeah, we've got that, but it's over there. And I'm like, no, can we talk about that some more, because that's kind of genius. And so they went back to their corner and said, I really think you guys should consider, before we rebrand you, taking this new name and making this your new name. It can be made by your name with all the Y's and consonants, but I think that you should really consider being this brand new brand. And they went back to their corner and they called me back. They're like, we love you so much. This is the best idea we've ever had. This is so great. And so before we even get out the door, we're gonna try to do a fix for them. So I think that's probably the best example I have. I haven't ever flipped anybody that's huge. Nobody that's like
Well,
really.
Must Be Nutty. They changed their name.
Oh,
Must Be Nutty
Siete.
Tortillas, yeah.
Yep, to Siete.
And they just straight up did it.
They just said formerly known as, I think.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Must Be Nutty.
And they
Angie's
did it.
Boom Chicka Pop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Bless
Totally.
Uh-huh.
I was thinking Siete did that at a really crucial point.
Yeah, that's
Because they
it.
were
That's the
that
place.
was the key.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They were going from kind of a limited distribution, not even really regionally. I think it was Austin and maybe a bit more. And they decided to make a play and said, if we are going to really grow and expand, this isn't going to be the thing that does it. So finding that crucial place to make that decision, and I think as a company, having the awareness that there might be key points in which to consider those things, especially if you're a startup and you're starting out. Because again, most people do not continue with whatever it is they created round one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's where guerrilla marketing comes in. You just start.
I was to say, everybody loves a t-shirt.
Yeah.
Everybody loves a
Everyone loves a
t-shirt.
sticker. Everyone loves a koozie. Everyone loves anything that's free.
Word. Got a question?
So this goes back to what we just were talking about, but it's mostly for Hat Creek. And I was wondering, right when you started talking about it, I wasn't familiar with the carrots, but I was familiar with the brand, and I had no idea how they're connected. And I was curious why you kept Hat Creek when you're going from this small place where Hat Creek is known to nationally where no one knows about it. And I was wondering if you guys talked about that or thought about
Yeah, we
the
did.
branding and name and why you decided to keep it.
We did. We decided to keep it because we all liked Hat Creek. I mean, like the opportunity there was great. Linda Barrios and I worked real hard on this together, actually, and she was like, I think you should consider taking Pickle Company out, because it was Hat Creek Pickle Company. She was like, maybe that's a little limiting. And so we did, and at her suggestion, put in Provisions, and it opens our, like, it just instantly opened where we can go with it. Like, we can do jams and chilies, we can do all sorts of heritage preservation methods under the Provisions label. But we all liked just Hat Creek. We did briefly consider, like, do we need to just like put a whole new name on it? But I think to your point, it's really scary to let entirely go of something that you've been building. Although it was definitely the right time. And yeah, we had a lot of the first designs that we saw were derivative of this, and this was like the complete departure, and all of us sat in the room and were like, that, right.
I think that's a great
Does that
case.
answer your question?
Yeah, because I mean they're so different.
They're totally
So that's
different.
why I was,
They're totally
I was
different.
curious about it.
And we wanted to at that point separate the brands, because they had been joined, but when I came in, we decided to really bring Provisions out and make it its own company, a sister of Burger Company, but not the same. They're not identical twins, you know?
And I can't think of a good reason. I think that's part of it, is I always say, like, is there a good reason? Why? if we can't come, maybe someday it's a full circle. Like, let's try to rename it.
Mhm.
And if we can't come up with something better, then we're going to circle back. And I think to the point that you had earlier about the employees, there's an origin story
Mhm.
that's meaningful, and you sort of lose it. You're like, I don't know, when Prince changed his name to the artist formerly known as, we're all like, wait, what? There's a little bit of an adrift feeling that you can cause. If you don't need to cause it, don't. And I think that's a really great example of there is no, I just can't think of a good
Yeah.
reason why you're like, oh, Hat Creek.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh.
Your questions? Yes, sir.
How important is it to, kind of a two-part question, how important is it to be doing what you're doing in a town that maybe has a good foodie reputation, supportive community, eclectic food industry? And then the second part is, and be honest, because I don't think there's anybody from the chamber in here, how do you find Austin in that respect?
I'm born and raised in Austin. I love this place.
Mhm.
And the community here has been fundamental to the success of the brands to a certain extent, but to my sanity as somebody putting the brands in the world, to have people that I can call and be like, Erin, this shit's crazy. Are you okay? And she's like, oh gosh. Or to celebrate with, or just to have a shared experience. That community is huge. And you know the towns that have it. It's Boulder, it's Austin, it's Minneapolis. There is a
Berkeley.
real startup CPG culture in those towns, and the infrastructure comes behind it. Austin is missing some significant infrastructure for CPG support in terms of manufacturers and people like in that capacity, but what we're missing there, we make up for in the spirited, young, scrappy companies. I mean, I've been on the phone with each of these people many times in the last couple of years, crying or celebrating.
Sometimes both in the same phone call.
True. I mean, that's true.
But can you elaborate on your point about the things that we're missing? You're
Yeah.
saying if we were a Battle Creek, Michigan, we'd have all that covered as far as manufacturing?
No, if we were in Boulder, Colorado, we'd have a lot of that covered though, because they've just been doing it longer. They've grown up more brands than we have at this point, and so as a result of that, the infrastructure has come in behind it. They have world-class co-packers there. Manufacturing is one of the hardest things that we do. Distribution, yeah. So Boulder has some of that. Like, I had to go to Boulder to learn how to make hot dang at scale to then bring it back to a manufacturer here, thank goodness. But it was, there's still a lot of sharing between those communities too.
Mhm.
And more like with SKU and with the success that we've seen, I think that infrastructure will come.
Yeah, it's coming, definitely. And I think something that we've seen in Austin is just the creation of incredible culture and companies and such innovation coming out of this city that has just far outpaced the ability of that infrastructure to be built. I think it's coming. I just don't think it's completely here yet, not to the level it really needs to be to truly support the kinds of products that are coming out of Austin. But then again, the kind of products that are coming out of Austin, some of them didn't exist 5 years ago.
Right.
You know,
We didn't
those are
exist
big
5 years
moving
ago.
pieces
Mhm.
that need to still get put into place. But Austin, as we've all seen, as we all know, is an incredible place to be bringing up a business. I mean, the community, the collaboration, the openness, and the willing to support each other, businesses and services, is something that continues to inspire me every day of my life.
But if somebody gave me $3 million, I would straight up open a refrigerated distro company.
We're
like
For
to
real.
like,
I've already
So if
talked
anybody
about it
wants
with
to talk.
people all the time. We're like, how are we gonna open
Yeah.
this? How are we gonna do this? You just gotta be nice.
we'll talk later.
Yeah, and I think as the industry matures, we're gonna start seeing kind of the money coming in to begin to support that infrastructure piece. We're just not quite there yet. Yes, sir.
How do you guys find your targeted demographic, and like how do you guys hone in on that, like in the food industry?
I think it's kind of hard as a CPG because you're selling to grocery stores, and so your market's really kind of everyone to some degree. But something that we do is we try to put together our demographic is we create a family, right? There's a mom and a dad, or there's a mom and a mom, or a dad and dad, whatever it is, and their kids, and maybe their dog, and we give them identities. And then when we're talking about anything related to Skull and Cake Bones, they are in the room with us. And we utilize them as if, would they like this product? Would they like this rebrand? Would they be into this? Do they care if it's artificial?
That's a really powerful tool. That's something that I walk a lot of my clients through, kind of building their ideal customer avatar, and not just your female 18 to 35. I'm like, no, what's her name? Where does she shop? What kind of YouTube videos does she watch? What kind of events does she go into? Really getting kind of down and dirty and deep and detailed with your audience, and I think that really helps companies identify maybe opportunities that they didn't see before, where they could be reaching their ideal customer that they weren't quite thinking of, and I think brings that whole idea of demographic into a much more dynamic place. You have questions for the lady? Y'all are like, it's 3:30, we've been parked for forever, we're done, maybe snacks, yeah.
Just in terms of like, because consumers were so getting more educated on just like the different types of packaging, compostable, recyclable, all that mess. Does that weigh a lot on you guys, like thinking, or maybe even new food companies coming up? Because obviously that stuff's a lot more expensive.
Right.
But does that like reflect a lot in sales? Do you guys think a lot about?
I might nominate Gals to talk about her first boxes.
Yeah.
They were amazing.
They were amazing.
They were gonna cost like $75 a box.
And also, cupcakes were gonna dry out.
And cupcakes were gonna, yeah.
With your $12.
With my $12 paleo vegan cupcake.
Done.
Yeah, it was gonna be $1 million idea. Should've gone with that.
Shit is humbling, man.
Sorry.
So, to answer your question, yes, it matters, but sometimes the consumer isn't educated in what is actually compostable and what is actually recyclable. So originally, we were gonna do this amazing paperboard box that was gonna fold in all these really clever ways, and it was gonna hold the cupcakes, and then you could see the cupcakes, because I didn't wanna use plastic, because plastic is the devil, right? So, go through all these hoops and bounds and find out that, you know, and I should have known this, paperboard is a breathing object. So if you put baked goods into a breathing object, it sucks all the air out. In 2 hours, they were rocks. I could have literally killed people with that. You know, so it's not gonna last for 5 days on the shelf, for sure. You know, it's like, eat it now, don't wait. But also what I learned through this whole process is that it depends on what it's coated in. So if it was clay coated, it was compostable eventually, but it was gonna take forever. And if it had a window, can't recycle it. So we went with plastic because it was recyclable. So that's how it matters. But are we gonna go out and say it's recyclable, it's compostable? I mean, we tell people, but we also got a lot of backlash for using plastic when we first launched into the world. And I had to go through my whole spiel and explain to people, actually, it is recyclable.
I think there's a delicate balance in retail. You're like, sure, we could have found a coating. We could have built our own plant to custom coat that
It could have been
paper
corn.
with something magic, GMO-free
Yeah.
corn.
Totally.
And then at what point are you buying that $20 cupcake?
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think go back to, what is the core of your company? What are we about? If you are all about being earth friendly, then you best get your packaging shit together. If not, I think then you start making steps backwards from there. So being smart, a lot of people are in the stand-up pouches these days. The ones that are metal in the backside and plastic on the front are not recyclable unless the person who purchases it separates them or if
Same
they,
with the window.
Yep, same with the window, or if you've coated it in a certain way. So I think you can make some choices as you go smartly, but at some point you've outstripped the ability to sell it at a good price. You've outstripped your customers' willingness to care. And I think you've also kind of done yourself a disservice because you're then in a container that isn't best promoting your product. So it's a really fine line that you kind of, it's like walking a tightrope and you just keep falling off. You just pray it's really close to the ground. We just sort of walk the line and keep falling off, and we think we find something, and then you fall off again, and you're like, oh, well, we could go this way, and it's really that, because you're really balancing the cost, the image, the earth friendliness, and you just sort of, you do the best you can. But I think that
You do the best
Ultimately, you need to
can.
sell
And there
your
are
product.
improvements. I mean,
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
gets better. I mean, even in,
I watched.
I started this 6 years ago, and there's been a lot of change in 6 years in what people package in. So it's hard because there's so much waste in this industry, and that is,
I mean, essentially your packaging is waste.
oh my God,
That's all it
it's
is.
just insane. But it's part of the devil. It's part of the contract with the devil in this business, and you just have to do the best you can do and give yourself room to improve when you can improve.
Yeah, the best thing you can do is do the best you can, but be really educated.
Mm-hmm.
Be really, because people are gonna, I mean, people come at us all the time and they're like, oh, you use soy? And they start screaming. And I'm like, hey man, easy. Like, again, I can make you one with the coconut milk and the almond milk, but you're not gonna pay for it.
It's a conundrum that we've had with provisions, because if we move this to a plastic jar, we could drop $1 off the shelf on at retail. But I'm not willing to do it, at least at this point. I never say never, because then.
And your breakage would go down.
Oh, I know. See,
All
it's a
of the
really
things.
it's
All of
super
the things.
compelling. But it's a fermented good, and part of the integrity of fermentation has to do with the vessel that it comes in. So.
Also, people can reuse it.
For now, it's this, and glass is one of the easiest things to recycle. So, I don't know, that's a hard one.
Yeah. I think is it Society Juice? It's down there in Lamar. Does a really cute job.
Juice
on their,
Society.
Juice Society. Yeah. Every once in a while on their Instagram feed, she'll show up like one of her bottles with flowers in it, and it's just a subtle way to say like, hey, you can reuse, but you can't mandate that. But I just thought that was really clever. I was like, oh.
No, I
Part
mean,
of it-
people
part of it
reuse
is-
glass. That's why we use glass in our trifles instead of plastic. Yeah, it would be considerably cheaper. It would be much easier to ship because it's based on weight. The heavier it
Breakage
is.
returns.
I mean, there's so many variables, but that glass is important to me because
hard-
it is reusable.
It's a hard cost-benefit analysis.
It's a
but-
it's a value thing.
Well, and the
for
label
now.
stays on,
Yeah.
so if you wash it, you still see my label.
Just one quick comment, those last two comments about glass, there was an article, I haven't done any more research, but there was an article maybe a week or two ago in Forbes about a major recycling operation in the US that has found glass to be among the most expensive
Oh, no kidding.
to recycle, and therefore losing its economic viability as a recyclable product.
And
See,
so things
there you
change
go.
all the time.
Which is why you should
I'm
just
sorry
reuse
guys,
it.
there's a couple more questions in the audience that I want to be able to get to before we get out of here. I saw a couple hands up.
Oh, I was just gonna add to that, I have a friend who had the same problem out in California with the recycled bottles. And she has a storefront, so what she did is she offered discounts to whoever anyone would bring back bottles.
And if you have a storefront,
On
then that's
Sundays, you
great.
get like $1 off, any other day, you get 25 cents off your next
And there may be some
juice.
local laws, like California is really cool about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I don't know if
Texas
Texas
is
I
not.
wanna give bad advice.
Texas is
but
not,
that was
but
huge for her.
yeah, there's some interesting options to
Well, like
think of.
Gucci does it, like if you come with your craft, you fill it up.
Uh-huh.
Was there another question? Yeah, I saw a hand.
I was going back to the organic and inorganic kind of stuff. I was just wondering, how would you sell a product that is a known inorganic product, but you're using organic ingredients in a sense, like using organic essential oils and such? Because it's like, you know, e-cig juice, like propylene glycol, known inorganic material, but using like organic essential oils in that same kind of process.
Are you thinking of like organic certification versus not?
Certification and also marketing for.
Certification is going to be up to certifying agencies. I'm not sure how they're handling those particular kinds of products at this point, or whether regulations have moved forward enough to be inclusive of products like that. In terms of marketing, well, how you market it would depend on whether you've got that certification or not. I think talking about quality, you know, at
If you're
the forefront
Educating
is
your
important.
consumer.
If you're in a notoriously dirty category, I think it's really important to scream, we're not dirty. So if you're going into, it sounds like you're going into a category that's known for having less than natural ingredients, less than organic ingredients, I think that becomes, at least for me, would rise to the top of my selling points and would be the top of my voice when I start speaking about the product, or when I start designing for the product. That would be big. I think in the case of no call-outs, that's a huge call-out, especially if you're going into a category where people aren't used to seeing it. They're not gonna know otherwise. They're just going to lump you in with everybody else.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Any
Totally
other
with
questions? Anything else, y'all?
Yeah.
All right. With that, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much.
Oh, I want both of those. Those are terrible.
bunch of doors. Thank y'all so much. I hope you have a great rest of your ETX startup week. Thanks for coming.
Word.
Carol.